Hey everybody, this is Jason Creel. This is the Lawn Care Life. I want to give you some tips on keeping your lawn green, and I wanted to give you some other than water and fertilizer, because water and fertilizer are great and I want to include that on my list, but I want to give you at least 5 other tips besides putting water on it and putting fertilizer on it, because I think there's a lot more to it than just that. Matter of fact, I run a weed control and fertilization company down here in Alabama, and I've got hundreds of yards, and some of them are greener than others, and I think there's a lot of factors of why that happens. Today's video is sponsored by Graham Spray Equipment. The spray rig on the back of my truck for my weed control and fertilization business comes from Graham Spray Equipment in Douglasville, Georgia. You can check out all they have to offer at grahamse.com. So here's my lawn. This is a Bermuda lawn. Some of you follow the channel know that this actually was woods about 3.5 years ago. We cleared it off and plugged it with Bermuda grass, and you can see it's got decent color. I'm not going to win any color of the year awards. It's fairly green, and I'm happy with how it's filled in. I'm still trying to get some bare spots to fill in. You can see out there in the distance. It's not quite where it needs to be yet, but it's getting close and looks way better than it used to. So what are some tips for keeping your grass green? Well, the first tip I want to offer you, and I'm dealing with Bermuda grass down here in the south, so we got Bermuda, St. Augustine, centipede, zoysia, but I think this would also apply for your cool season lawns in many cases as well. But the first tip is actually mow the grass a little higher. So when we get into the summer months, let me tell you what I do as far as mowing, and I've got primarily Bermuda lawn. When I'm mowing the grass, the first cut of the year, I will try to cut it low to get rid of a lot of the dormant grass and try to let the sunlight get down the roots. And what that does is allow it to green up faster. So that's typically done in March in my area. And really the grass not really growing, but again, I'm trying to get rid of some of that dormant layer grass to let sunlight get down the roots. All right, well, at that point, I'm trying to keep the grass as low as possible because I like the way the Bermuda looks. So I'm cutting it at 1.5 inches. That's as low as my lawnmower will go. And I try to keep it at 1.5 inches as long as possible. Now, for me, I'm not able to do that the whole summer. Matter of fact, I just recently had to start raising the deck. So maybe on into June, maybe toward the end of June, I can keep it at 1.5 inches, but that requires me mowing it at least once a week, if not more than that, and sometimes even using a PGR, a growth regulator on the lawn to keep it from growing as fast. Now, I've got about 4 acres here, so I've got a lot of grass to grow. Maybe if you got a little bit of yard and you want to mow it every 4 days, then you can keep it low all year long. But this grass really takes off and starts growing in the summertime, especially when it's been fertilized and we've had rain. What I did this year, when in June, I started raising the deck. Okay, so I went to 1.75 inches, and I'm still mowing it about every week. I'm telling you, it's growing fast. But then I went up to 2 inches. I believe this last time I was cutting it at 2.25 inches. I may have to go higher than that. Eventually, it'll start slowing down again and not growing quite as fast. You say, Jason, what's the point of that? Well, it does a couple things. One, you're not putting so much stress on the grass every time you mow it. You're just taking a little bit off the top, where if it's growing really fast and your frequency of mowing is not any different, then you're putting more stress on the grass when you cut it. The other thing you're doing is, to me, you're allowing a little bit longer grass to kind of shade the roots a little bit, if you will. I'm not 100% sure if this is a good legitimate reason or not, but it seems like the grass that is left a little longer is able to handle the hot, dry summers than grass that's cut really short. The second tip I want to give you is similar, and we kind of alluded to it, but it's mowing more frequently. So let me share with you a story. Last year I had 2 customers side by side. Both of them, I take care of their yard, weed control, fertilization, both Bermuda yards, and of course both of them I'm doing basically the exact same thing. I'm spraying the same products on there. One of them, I believe, had their yard mowed every week. The other one had it mowed every other week by 2 different companies. The one that was mowed every week was green, looked almost perfect. Yard looked great. The one that was mowed every other week had huge brown patches in it. Matter of fact, let me just put a picture up now. It's not the yard I'm referring to, but it's similar to what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna put a picture on your screen right now to show you what can happen to Bermuda lawns sometimes. So I recently did a video showing a yard that had big brown patches like that, and people say, oh, that's drought, that's this, that, and the other. It's actually not. In those situations, what happens with the Bermuda grass is it starts growing really fast, and there's so much heat trapped up under the grass when in the hot summer days, and when you cut it low, it, for whatever reason, it just zaps it, okay? You're taking too much off and it will literally make huge brown spots in the lawn. And one of the reasons that you can tell that it's not a disease or a fungus or something like that is often there will be lines in the grass. You can see that it's done with straight lines. It has something to do with the lawnmower. Now, I don't even blame it necessarily on the mowing crew. This particular person, when I began to ask more questions, he insisted on having them cut the grass the same height every time, every 2 weeks. Well, that's not gonna work on a Bermuda lawn. If you say, I'm just gonna keep cutting it at 2 inches, if I mow my yard every 2 weeks at 2 inches, I feel strongly that I would have a brown yard, because I'm gonna be putting so much stress on it every time I cut it, and eventually you end up with these huge brown spots in the yard. So if you're gonna mow it every 2 weeks, which I highly do not recommend, then you're gonna have to raise your deck almost every single time, and eventually by the end of the summer, you're probably gonna be cutting it at about as high as level as you possibly can because it's growing too fast. So the second tip is mow more frequently. And like I said, for my yard, even mowing more frequently, I still having to raise the deck a little bit to keep from taking too much of the grass off when I mow it. This one of my chickens, that's Mrs. Cheeks. All right, the other thing I want to talk about for the third tip is sharpening your lawnmower blades. When you have dull lawnmower blades, what you end up doing is you're basically tearing the end of the grass versus a nice clean cut. And that's not gonna make a yard just look horrible, but when you're tearing the grass instead of getting a nice clean cut, it can leave a brown tips on the yard, affecting the green color of the grass. So another thing you can do is sharpen your lawnmower blades. I'm not some fanatic about this, sharpen them every other time I cut the grass. But at the same time, if you say, I don't sharpen them every year or every other year, that's probably not enough unless you just have a tiny yard to keep your blades nice and sharp. You can do a search on YouTube after you watch this video for Lawn Care Life, how to sharpen a lawnmower blade, and something will come up for you. Fourth tip I want to provide for you, you can see under these particular trees, I've got some emerald zoysia grass. I'm out here watering. It's early in the morning. The tip is to water your grass early and to water it really deeply. So, meaning if you have irrigation, I tell my customer, I said, you know, let's run it 30 minutes per zone and just do it once a week. Now, some of them like to run their irrigation all the time. The problem with that is a couple things. One, it's more likely to have fungus. It's more likely to have weeds like nutsedge, things like that. Just love wet areas. Doveweed is something we get in our area. So if you're watering very often, it can lead to those problems. But also, if you're not soaking it really good, you're not allowing the water to get down there deeper to the roots, promote deep root growth. So watering early in the morning will allow the grass to utilize the water before the hot of the day. But when the sun comes up, it will dry it up where the water's just not sitting on the leaf blade. I had a customer yesterday say, hey Jason, what are all these little brown patches all over my yard? And I asked him about his watering habits. He said, yeah, I'm watering my grass 3 or 4 times a week, trying to keep up with my neighbor, because his neighbor's yard looked unbelievable. And I said, well, are you watering, what time are you watering? He said, I'm watering in the evening. And he had what's called dollar spot. Now I'm making show you a little bit in my yard. Dollar spot is these little brown patches that you can see, and you see that, and if that's all over your yard, all these little brown patches, then it does give your yard a brown tint. I mean, it just doesn't look good. Now, it's a fungus, but what it's typically caused by is water sitting on the lawn at night. Now, some of it's hard to prevent. Just dew out here on the grass can make it fungicide, give you a little bit of protection from it, but that can be quite expensive. But watering in the morning and less often can help prevent things like dollar spot. Now we're going to go to number 5, and that is put fertilizer in the yard. Now my Bermuda yard, it can tolerate a lot of fertilizer, high nitrogen fertilizer. But to be honest with you, I didn't fertilize that much this year. One, because I got a huge yard. 2, because fertilizer is quite expensive. But I did fertilize it. I used a 38% nitrogen fertilizer and put it out in May on this yard, and it's holding color pretty well. So I used a slow release fertilizer. And that I do recommend that when possible, because a lot of times people put a high nitrogen fertilizer on there. It's a quick release fertilizer and it'll make it green, but it just simply doesn't last very long. So I put a slow release fertilizer on my lawn. That's what I also do for my customers, and it holds the color for months, which is a great thing. Again, these all kind of work together. So I mean, if you're gonna put a high nitrogen fertilizer on there and get your grass growing like crazy, but you're not willing to mow it more than every other week, then you're probably gonna have problems, because it's gonna be growing so fast, and then you're gonna hack it way down, and you're gonna put a lot of stress on the lawn. So it kind of all works together. My yard, I feel like, has pretty good color, but I'm mowing it frequently. And yes, I use fertilizer, but I didn't put tons of fertilizer on it, but because I'm practicing a lot of the other things I'm telling you in this video, my yard still has a nice green color to it. Again, if I want to go 2 weeks come by and come in here and hack it back down to 1.5 inches, it's going to be brown no matter how much fertilizer I put on it. It's going to put some stress on the yard. All right, the sixth tip I'm going to provide for you is less herbicide. Now, I use herbicides, okay? I spray my yard with herbicides, but I'm sort of strategic about it, even from my customers' point of view, because if I go out there and I just want to blanket everything with a herbicide every time I see a weed, you end up taking some color out of the lawn. So let me give you an example. I'm looking at this yard right here, and I've got some Kalinga popping up in the yard. I've got these little, lily pad things. I'm not sure if that's penny wart, or I get all those little weeds confused, but there's some weeds out here. Here's a little bit of spurge in the yard. There are some weeds. Now, when you look at it from a distance, I hardly see any weeds. It looks great, but when you get down close, there are some weeds out here. What if I said, man, I've got weeds in my yard and it's July. I'm gonna go out there and I'm just gonna blanket it with a whole round of 8 ounces per acre of Dismiss, or I'm gonna get out here with some Celsius and just blanket the whole yard, or I'm gonna blanket it with this or that or that. Matter of fact, I'm just gonna mix them all together and really kill them all dead. Well, that's not exactly a good idea. What I would do, and what I do during the summer months, is I almost never blanket a yard with anything. And if I am spraying it, I'm typically going at a light dose. So I might be out fertilizing, and I'll have in my Ride-On spreader spray, I'll have a 1/4 ounce per acre of metsulfuron, which is very low rate, and I'll have 12 ounces of Change Up, which is a very, very low rate. And then in my backpack sprayers or handheld sprayers, I might have something like Change Up and Pro Sedge mixed together. I might have Celsius and Certainty mixed together. And that Celsius and Certainty combo, I've talked about it before, but one thing I like about it, it typically does fairly well in the hot weather without stressing out the yard too bad. But I think you need to understand one thing, is that your grass does not like herbicides. It will tolerate herbicides oftentimes if you follow the label. Grass tolerates it, doesn't love it. So if you go out there on a super hot day because you got 4 weeds in your yard and you're just gonna bomb it with some herbicide at a high rate to make sure you kill those weeds dead, then yes, you can take a lot of the color out of the yard. Even if you're spot treating weeds and you've got something that can run a little bit hot on the yard, and you go out there and spot treat weeds all over your yard, you may see that, wow, you know what, that really took a little color off of my yard when I was out spot treating the weeds. You say, well, Jason, how do you keep the weeds out? Well, I do a couple of things. One, I do a blanket application early in the year, like January or February. So that's got my pre-emergent in there and a post-emergence. I'm trying to get rid of as many weeds as possible, as well as controlling as many future weeds as possible with that pre-emergent. Then this year I did something a little different on my Bermuda zoysia lawns. I came back in May when yes, it's getting hot, but it's not crazy hot. In May, I sprayed it with Spectacle Flow, and that has kept the vast majority of the weeds out this summer. So in the summertime, I'm basically running around spot treating weeds, spurge, Lespedeza, a lot of nutsedge, Kalinga, things like that. I'll give you an example. This is a little test plot I've got for another video, and I'm spraying nutsedge, and you can see, look at there, I have zapped that nutsedge pretty good. And I was using blindside on this, but if you step back and look, you can see the darker green where I didn't spray over here, and it took a little of the life out of the grass right there. Now this is actively growing grass. It did a great job on the weeds, but it definitely zapped it a little bit. If I'd have done that over my whole yard, or even just walking around spot treating, had all these light color spots where I sprayed blindside. So just understand that your herbicides, if you do need to get out there and spray, you might want to do it earlier in the morning when it's not quite so hot. And be careful about blanketing your yard, and definitely go with lower rates when possible. Let me give you another example. This is some zoysia grass I've got, and it doesn't get a whole lot of sun, to be honest with you. But in the springtime, the last 2 years, this Zoysia has looked unbelievably great. And then also for the last 2 years, in the summer it does this. Now I'm not 100% sure what's going on here, just to be honest with you. It may have something to do with these crepe myrtles filling out and really just not getting enough sunlight during the summer months. That possibly is it. But I also think it could be from something I've sprayed on it, a herbicide application, that is just kind of taking the life out of it. Because there's some places over here where it gets a little more sunlight and it looks much healthier. This doesn't look great, but believe me, it's much better than the area I showed you at first. I'm wondering if it has something to do with the sunlight or possibly a herbicide application that has knocked some of the life out of this. Not to mention we drive golf carts over it, which is not exactly the best for it either, and we're gonna get that into the next point. If you got an idea of what could be causing this in the Zoysia lawn, I would love to hear it in the comments. And the last thing I wanna mention is the compaction of the soil. So maybe you need to aerate your soil if you have compacted soil, but you know, my kids, we have a little golf cart that we ride around on our property. And driving the golf cart around all over the yard is not exactly good for it, okay? You just a lot of compaction. You know, you may have seen the classic examples of this in the backyard where the dogs run the same exact path around the perimeter of the fence and the soil's compacted. Of course, they've, you know, torn away any grass that might possibly grow there as well. But all the foot traffic, all the wear and tear can be rough on your yard. Again, aeration may be one thing that you can do to help with that. The other thing you can do is when you're mowing, if you got a big zero-turn mower like I do, then you may need to change up your mower patterns, because if you're just going in the same path every single time, those tires are going over the same exact piece of grass every single time. And if you'll change your mowing patterns up, it can definitely help. You'll see people who mow with a push mower, typically the yards look better because they're not putting that heavy weight on the grass. Even foot traffic can make a big difference. I had a customer yesterday, he said, hey, I got these 2 yards. He said, I know the grass not growing there. He said, that's where my kids play wiffle ball every day. So you had the pitcher's mound and the batter's box, and there was not much grass growing in those areas. So foot traffic, golf cart traffic, things like that, not great for the grass. But you know what? There's a balance between your yard just to stare at and the yard to be out playing in. So I'm okay if I have a little wear and tear from kids playing on the yard. I've showed you around my yard a little bit. It's looking decent, still trying to get it to grow in. We plugged this with grass this March, I believe. And I am desperately trying to get it to grow in before the fall, because I don't want to come out here with a bunch of ryegrass. So we just threw some sod out here and I'm watering it and fertilizing it, trying to get it to fill in, top dressing it, and I'll probably have to still smooth it out because some of the dirt's washing before it all fills in. But anyway, we're working on it. I got 4 acres, a lot of grass, and actually spread it all, just a few pallets of sod. Hopefully you learned something today, how to keep your grass green. Yes, fertilizer's great, yes, watering's great, but there's a lot of other things that are involved in having a great looking lawn. Add to the list, what I leave off, correct me where I'm wrong, or if you have the hottest tip of all that I didn't put on the list, and please do so in the comments. Would appreciate you liking the video, subscribing to the channel if you hadn't done so. I've got almost 1,000 videos on the channel, just hit 100,000 subscribers not too long ago. Appreciate all the support. If you're thinking about getting in the weed control and fertilization business, mowing business, mosquito spraying business, you can go to lawncarelife.com. There's a lot of resources available for you there, including the popular Weed Control and Fertilization Academy. If you want to go to the GIE Plus Expo, which is now called the Equip Expo, then use the code LawnCareLife when you register. That's all one word, LawnCareLife. You'll save 50% off your registration. We'll see you guys in the next video.